Hello everyone and welcome back to another layout update. So this layout update is going to be for the months of December, January, and February. I know in my last video upload there I had mentioned I was going to be getting one out sooner, but as most of you are aware, life tends to get in the way most of the time, so I can't really hold my promises in terms of when I will release the layout updates or any other videos on my channel. But here we are today. I've made a little bit of progress on the layout and I'm nearing some milestones for this layout as well, which we'll get into a little later in this video. Without any further ado, I'll show you what's been going on and what I've been up to for the last couple months. So we will start off here in the yard. This is the main entrance to the yard on the lower level, and as you can notice right off the bat, I have installed the car shops. Now, this layout was not the original plan that I had intended on going with. In previous videos, I had mentioned that I was considering installing a Y in this empty space here. In order to do that, I would have had to extend the benchwork outward, and after some careful consideration, I decided that the amount of work that was involved in extending the benchwork, installing and wiring the Y with the reverser and all, it was just not worth the amount of work I'd have to put into it for the amount of use it would get. So, in lieu of that, I opted for the turntable method. Now, the turntable is nice because I can just fit it in there, no issue. However, it's really not going to see that much use anyway, so I'm not too concerned that, turntables aren't used as often these days anymore. But I thought it was just kind of adds a neat little eye-catching scene in the yard here. Aside from that, I did install the car repair shops back there. Right now it's stuffed full of Via cars. That's just from the recent ops session that I hosted, I guess it would be last weekend or the weekend before that. So that is not a passenger car repair shop by any means. It's going to be just for miscellaneous cars. And the way that this area will be, or is intended to be used, will actually be for cars that are causing issues on the layout. They will be shoved into those tracks, and then that will give me a better idea as to what cars I actually need to repair in order to get them running again. But it's kind of a neat little scene. And then, as I'd already mentioned, the turntable's there, and there's also going to be some little storage tracks back there. I have aligned it so that there's one run-through track, and then there's one track where you actually have to get on the turntable and operate it in order to access the contents that are held on that track. The only issue with this area is actually the turntable right now. When we installed it, everything seemed okay. We figured out that after, once we started using it anyway, when we ran the locomotive onto the turntable, it would short out the yard section, and that was a quick fix. All I had to do was flip the polarities. The polarities, when we installed it, we had taken out all of the wiring out of the little control module there, and silly us, we forgot to take pictures and we did not have the instructions, so we kind of had to play it by ear, and we installed it, figured out that the polarity needed to be reversed. We did that. However, now the turntable shorts out when there's any sort of pressure on it, and the control module also doesn't work now. So we got to take that apart. We got to look at a few options on how to repair that. Hopefully that's not too big of an issue. It's hopefully it'll be a quick, easy fix, but only time will tell once I start diving into that project a little further. Now, aside from the track work going on down in the car repair shop, I've also been working on a few little track arrangements up top here on the upper level. Unfortunately, my tripod doesn't go that high, so I will reposition here and I'll show you what's going on up top. So you will remember from previous layout updates, I had ran a switch off of the top of the yard ladder and ran it straight back off to an angle back there, and that was my engine storage tracks or refueling tracks for the return trip downgrade. Now what I went ahead and did is I installed another turnout and brought two more tracks down to the end of the layout there. These aren't, well, right now there's engines on them, and again, that was just because the op session, there was a ton of trains running, so I had to kind of throw my power wherever I could, where it wouldn't be in the way. And the intended purpose for these tracks, however, is just maintenance of way. So this is going to be kind of a grungy old maintenance of way scene. There's not going to be a whole lot going on here. It's just going to be for like ballast and side dump car storage, maybe some bulkheads. The eventual scene will just be like piles of ties or ballast and maybe an old set of rails that's been disconnected from the existing rails that's kind of hidden in the dirt. So that's kind of the idea behind this scene. It can be used for engine storage. I'm not too fussy about that, but for the most part, the intended use for these two tracks is just maintenance of way type equipment, and then this will remain the engine track or refueling track or storage. And then if we move on down here, I also added another track over here, and this is kind of undecided still. It's just a short little stub end siding. You can see the Via F40 sitting on there, and I think what I've kind of decided on is this is just going to be a back track. So you'll be able to put locomotives here, similar to the way that Via is sitting right now, and also bad order cars or just another place to throw cars. I'm also considering, even though it's going to be kind of intended as a backtrack, is putting a small little pit in here where I can shove a couple grain cars in. There'll be a small little conveyor belt that can offload rolling stock, and then that'll just give me another little industry type track for when I host op sessions. So we have relocated, and we are now looking at the industrial park here at the end of my branch line. And there's been a fairly substantial change at this end of the layout, and that is the fact that there is no longer a swing gate connecting the end of the branch line into the main section of the layout. Now there's a couple reasons why I decided to remove the gate. The first was it really didn't offer much operational ability, and it wasn't really being used as intended, I guess. The only reason why I originally planned and installed a swing gate at this end of the layout was to complete the loop between the branch line and the main line. So the branch line switch that is near the yard comes off. It would come all the way down here. It would go across the swing gate through the backdrop, and there would be a switch that comes off of the main line at the other end of the room to create a full loop, and I could run trains continuously. After, well, this is like probably the fourth year of building this layout now, I have never ran a train in a continuous loop using this route. So I really don't use it that often. When it was used, it was usually during op sessions, and unfortunately during those op sessions, when that route was used, it just caused nothing but issues. The gate wouldn't line properly, and then on top of that, it was a real hassle to run trains through the little tunnel down there, through the backdrop, and then have to coordinate whether there are trains in the way and having the switch thrown so that the train can run through and back onto the main line. It was a bit of a headache, and I decided the best alternative to fix that issue was just to remove the gate altogether and not even worry about trying to make the gate operate as intended, because at this point I'm not sure that I can make the gate work absolutely flawlessly. Now, in addition to that issue, I was kind of looking at it, and after a while I started to dislike the idea of having to open up the door to the layout room, and then immediately upon entry I was met by another obstruction, which was that swing gate. Now that the swing gate is out of there, I find that I really enjoy just being able to come into the room and flow freely into the one portion of the layout, the branch line and the gate. There's no obstructions. It's free flowing, and it just feels a lot smoother rather than having to come into the room, open the gate, make sure it closes behind you properly so that trains can go over it. And then in op sessions as well, it was a bit of a hassle because you have a lot of switching going on down here, and the gate was also used as a bit of a lead, a switch lead. So quite often you'd have operators who are wanting to go out of the room to get a drink or some food or use the washroom, and they would have to wait for whatever the operator at this end of the layout is doing to get off of the bridge, and then they'd have to exit that way. So it feels a lot smoother, just being able to walk freely into the room without any obstructions, and I think that in the long run it's just going to improve the feel of the layout. Now, because I removed the swing gate, I had to kind of rework the track plan at the end of the branch line here, and because the gate was used as a bit of a switch lead, I had to come up with an idea as to how I was going to work around that. Now, it was pretty simple. All I did was I threw a set of crossovers in here, and this track here is enough to accommodate a consist of 3 locomotives, which some of the guys that come over and operate, they preferred a trio of units rather than just switching with 2 units. So I made sure that I was able to accommodate that. This track here, I just kind of put in there just kind of for some visual interest. It's just going to be a little storage track for whatever rolling stock needs to be stored there. Eventually this track here is going to be changed, and this whole area in here is going to be like a transload facility. So I think I'm going to end up putting another track in here to handle a few extra cars, and then this track here will be closer to the backdrop and will go inside of a building for some sort of dry product that would have to be offloaded indoors. Other than that, there was really no substantial reworking of the track plan down here. I also extended this industry here, and this is now going to be a lumber yard that will accept a few lumber cars, maybe a few box cars and bulkheads and so forth. But the main idea of the industrial park on the branch line has really not changed because of the gate being removed. It's just actually added a little bit more of an interesting switching operation, because now instead of being able to loop back into the layout, you now have to run around your train and go back the way you came. So it just kind of adds a little bit more realism. It's a dead end sort of industry track, and I think I'm going to like this a lot more than I did when I had the gate here originally. Another thing to note is that this track here, the cork comes to the end of the layout for a reason, and during op sessions I have a setup module that actually extends out into the hallway, and that allows a place for the operators to set up their power, and if they have lots of rolling stock that they like to run, they can set up out in the hallway, leave all of their boxes and belongings out in the hallway. That way it doesn't crowd the layout room, especially because it can get busy up here with 10 guys, and having to work around a bunch of empty boxes for rolling stock can be a little bit annoying sometimes. So during op sessions, this track here will extend out into the hallway, and it will provide a nice open area for the operators to set up and take down. Alright, so what you're looking at here is a little bit more progress that I've made on the staging. And what this is here is it's going to be a little mini scene. The reason for this is because my staging tracks are going to be stub ends, so I'm going to need a place to run around the train in order to shove it the remaining distance into the stub end tracks, which will be under the industrial park on the branch line. So this little scene here is going to be a border, an international border crossing, and the reason for that is the staging operation is going to be a Burlington Northern Santa Fe operation only, and the idea behind that is the Burlington Northern Santa Fe will bring cars up from the United States of America, which will be my staging tracks, and they will bring them over to the main yard, and they will interchange with the Canadian National Railway, and they will take the cars that aren't being used back down to staging, and that'll just be kind of a back and forth operation. I also plan on installing an industry somewhere maybe on the branch line, or dedicating one of the existing industries on the branch line to the Burlington Northern Santa Fe, so that they can also have a little bit of an operation elsewhere rather than just shuttling cars back and forth. So the biggest project that I completed over the last couple months was finally getting around to installing the track for the pulp mill. And what's nice about having the track work complete in the pulp mill is it essentially means that the track work for this entire layout, aside from staging, is about 90% complete. So I'm nearing a huge milestone in getting the track 100% laid, which means I can start to move on to other activities such as scenery and maybe even signaling and block detection around the layout. So I just jump to the other side here. So this track here is actually going to be for wood chip hoppers. It's going to be a wood chip unload track. Not 100% prototypical, but it's kind of what I'm able to work with given the space parameters. There's possibility that I will expand in the future, but I got to kind of deal with what I have here first. So yeah, this is going to be wood chip tracks back here. You won't be able to actually see these tracks, but this is going to be for the finished product that's going to be loaded into box cars and shipped out. And like I said, this will be in a building. So there's 2 tracks there, able to accommodate 6 cars total. And just flipping around here, these 3 tracks here are kind of the arrival tracks, so the train will pull in, and these tracks are quite short. So what's neat about this operation is you have to do a little bit of thinking, and you actually have to double your train in. So you'll bring the train down, you'll have to cut off a set of cars way back up the top of the switch there, pull the first string of cars in, cut your power, run around that set of cars, and pull the next string of cars into the track. As for actually switching out the cars, I'm not sure how that's going to work. Given that I really don't have a lot of track to mess around with here and to kind of push cars out of the way and actually switch the industries, what I think this operation will involve is the power coming in, dropping the loads or empties, cutting off of the train, and then actually removing the outgoing cars, and I'll have an independent switcher for the mill switch in all of the loaded and empty cars into the corresponding tracks. So these 2 tracks back here is for chemicals. That'll take in a variety of different tank cars, and then this final track up in the back here, that's actually going to be for chemical storage and tank car storage. So a lot of times these pulp mills will have a track that is strictly dedicated to bulk materials such as chemicals in case the railroads are unable to deliver due to strikes, or in the case of the British Columbia Railway, slides can quite often cut off service for a substantial period of time, which means the pulp mills aren't able to receive the products by rail in the time that's needed. So they need a certain amount of or months worth of supplies in case that happens. So this track here will be constantly rotated out, but it will also just be for storage of tank cars and chemicals. So aside from all the track work that I've been doing, I've also gone ahead and installed a number of tortoise switch machines. So for the pulp mill, I've installed 3, and those are all of the hard to reach switches. So the switch that comes off the main line, that switch there that can be thrown for the chemical storage, and then this switch here that splits off into the arrival tracks and the switch leads. The rest are going to remain hand thrown just because of the cost of tortoises, and they really don't need to be powered. It's easy enough to reach these switches here and the switch in the background. For my shorter operators, I might have to offer a little step stool, because when you do have cars in the foreground here, it can be a little bit difficult to reach over them and throw the switch without knocking them over. So I might have to come up with some solutions for that. In addition to the tortoise switch machines up at the pulp mill, I also installed a couple on the branch line. So one at either end of the grain elevator here, and then there's just one tortoise that can be thrown right before the industrial park there, and that kind of is the switch that comes off of the main line on the branch line, so to speak, or the main track of the branch line. So the branch line only received 3 tortoises, and the rest are the Caboose Industries hand throws. I also went ahead and installed tortoise switch machines at the double crossovers here. At the double crossovers before the grade up to the second level, as well as the switch that can be thrown to access the intermodal yard. As I mentioned, the switch to access the intermodal yard received a tortoise switch machine. The entrance to the yard also received a tortoise switch machine on both the upper and lower levels. And then I also installed 2 tortoise switch machines for the entrance of the yard here. One for the switch coming off the main line, and then the first switch that starts the series of yard tracks, just because it's going to be kind of in a hard to reach location, being that it's set quite a ways back under the second level, and then also having all of the shop tracks in front of it. It can be a little bit of a hassle to get to. I may even go one step further and install a tortoise switch machine on the third, or up to the third switch in the yard ladder. So we'll see how that goes, but that pretty much only leaves me with maybe 3 other switches throughout the layout that need to receive tortoise switch machine, and then that pretty much handles all of the track work and switch machines. The rest will remain hand throws, just as I mentioned, from a cost and time perspective. So another little fun thing that I did over the last couple months was I installed this little mini fridge up here in the train room. One of my close friends was just looking to get rid of it out of his apartment to free up some space, so I let him know I'd be more than happy to take it. I got it up here, and I was a little skeptical at first because it looked like it probably wasn't going to fit under the layout, but it fit with like a 1/2 to 1/4 inch to spare. Right where the fascia is cut out up top there, that's actually the bottom of the plywood tabletop, so it just squeaked in there. I also had to rearrange some of the wiring and the bus wires underneath the layout in order to accommodate the fridge. So it fit in there with minimal room to spare, and it's just a nice little thing to have up here now. I always have access to water or different beverages, and it's particularly nice for op sessions. The guys I'm more than happy to have the guys just help themselves to the different beverages that I stock up in there, and makes for a good time. So aside from all of the work that I've done on the layout over the last couple months, I've also been pretty heavily involved in working off the layout and working on my locomotives. So I've recently got involved in installing decoders and LEDs into most of my locomotives. I primarily focused on my CN locomotives just because that's going to be the primary railroad running on this layout. So I have most of my Canadian National locomotives switched over to ESU with LEDs, and I've upgraded all of the speakers and so forth. On top of what I've done for myself, I've also been doing a ton of work for my friend Mike, who comes over here quite often, and I've been cleaning up and making sure that all of his overland brass models, because that's really all he collects, are running up to snuff and without any issues, because for those of you who are familiar with overland brass, they tend to be quite particular about how they need to be set up in order to run flawlessly. So there's a lot of work that needs to go into them, whether it's programming and taking them apart to clean them out thoroughly and putting them back together. It's a big process. However, in front of you is one of my overland brass models. This is an ex-Union Pacific -8, and for those of you who are familiar with CN, in 2019 they had a whole bunch of leased power due to a power shortage. and some of the units that they ran as leased power were these GECX units. They also had, I have another lease unit that I custom, I guess, painted in a sense, or deckled, that I'll show you here in a bit, but they had a whole variety of leased power running in their consists, and one of these types were these GECX units, which were Union Pacific units. So you can see I have crossed out the original number as well as the Union Pacific stenciling on the side, and I've also put a patch over the little Union Pacific Herald on the nose, and you may or may not be able to make it out, but right at the bottom there underneath the window, that's actually says GECX 9129. So that's the locomotive number currently. And what I did with this unit is obviously I crossed out the numbers and patched it to GECX. I also painted the little AC unit on the side here because the current locomotive has a blue replacement on the side. I also put ESU Loc Sound in it, so we'll just start it up here now. So that's a startup sequence. It might be a little bit quiet. I've decided to go or turn down the volume on all of my locomotives to a fairly low volume. I find that when there's a lot of operators up here, if all of the units are quite loud, it tends to be a little bit deafening. So I like the units to stay a little bit quieter, and so that you can only hear them in the location that they're at. I don't like to be able to hear a locomotive that is on the grade from all the way at the other end of the room. That's just kind of a preference. I think it's a little more realistic, and it makes everything kind of more consistent across the board. Anyway, I installed LED headlights and ditch lights. These were a pain. I'm sure some of you have some experience working on brass, but because they're brass, they short like crazy, and if these LEDs aren't properly isolated and insulated, you're gonna be burning out quite a few LEDs. So I think the headlights were pretty straightforward. The ditch lights, on the other hand, required a little bit more work because I actually had to install the housings. The original Overland models unit did not have the ditch light housings installed, so I bought I can't remember what manufacturer it was, but they're brass ditch light housings. I installed them, painted them, and I ran the LED through them. And I think probably 6 LEDs later, I was finally able to stop the LEDs from shorting out inside of the housing. So it was a bit of a hassle, but I got it finally, and I'm very happy with the way this unit turned out. And it runs pretty well flawlessly now, so I'm super happy with the way that it turned out. So just based off of the volume of units that I've done, I'm not going to show you the sound and the LEDs for all of them. I will actually go ahead and make a separate video about that, showing all the different things that I've done to the units. However, this unit here is that other leased unit that I was talking about that I did, and this was another one that was commonly found on the CN trains in 2019. They were nowhere near this clean. I have to get this one weathered up and rusted pretty badly because these units were not in good shape, and from what I've heard, they weren't the greatest runners either. So this is just another example of a leased unit that I have decided to go ahead and replicate, and I'm super happy with the way this one turned out. It also received ESU Loc Sound, LEDs, and a speaker upgrade. So super happy with the way this one turned out. Now I'll just do a quick run by of some of the other locomotives I worked on here. I did a full upgrade, sound LED, and speaker install on the 2113. I also did this Athearn Genesis 5602. It received LEDs, loc sound, and a speaker upgrade as well. The 8023, the same thing. It also has marker lights. And the 8829 also received ESU loc sound, LEDs, and a speaker upgrade. The 8023 and 8829 will be receiving different speakers than I already installed, just because they aren't sounding as great as I would like them to. And then finally, I also went ahead and installed loc sound, LEDs, and a speaker into these two units here, as well as some other custom work, which I will go over in a separate video, like I mentioned. With all that being said, that pretty much concludes this layout update. I've got a fair amount done over the last couple of months, and I'm pretty happy with the way that the layout is progressing at this point. It's funny, I find that most of the progress is made in the 1 week before the ops session, as I find a lot of motivation to get things completed on the layout in preparation for the ops session. That was certainly true in this case, because the week leading up to my most recent ops session, I was burning the candle at both ends, so to speak. Aside from everything that I've completed on the layout, obviously I've been keeping real busy with the custom work on my locomotives, as well as the locomotives I'm working on for friends. So that's been an interesting experience, getting used to being able to do that and building a new skill set there. But I won't keep you any longer. I hope you enjoyed this layout update. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, feel free to drop them in the comment section below. I will be more than happy to answer. Feel free to also give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you next time right here on my channel.